So I'm going to show you another way to open an image in Photoshop. If we right click on something that's in the internet and say copy image, it copies that whole image up to our pasteboard. And then when we come over to Photoshop and go File, New, the dimensions that are in here are already the size of that image. So you don't have to change anything. All you have to do is say OK and then go to Edit and Paste, and that image will come in as a layer. On this one, we're going to use some new tools like curves and dodge and burn. So starting with curves, we'll add a curves adjustment layer. I typically add mine from down here in the bottom because it's easier to find the word than to find the little symbol up here. And you can see that there is a histogram in this one as well. So pretty much all of the functions that you had in levels are also here in curves. It's just a different way of showing it and actually giving you finer detail. So a couple people I've talked about who are channels and curves whizzes tell me that they pretty much do all of their adjusting in curves because it's such a oh, the word is escaping me. It's very multi-use. That's not quite what I was going to say, but that'll work for now. To brighten this image, because I'm looking at it and thinking, okay, well, I want this to be the main focus, but overall it just feels a little bit dark. So if I want to brighten the whites, in this case I'm going to grab this top right corner and drag it a little bit to the left. And if I want my darks to actually pop, I can grab this bottom corner and drag it a little tiny bit to the right. And then the midtones, instead of having a slider here, you can actually grab this line in the middle and create a point. And if you drag it to the left, it will lighten everything overall. If I drag it to the right, it will darken everything overall. Now in this case, we're just trying to get a general overall fix for it being kind of darker. And also, you can affect the red, the green, and the blue separately from this RGB. So let's try that out. I've switched to the red, and if I click and drag, that makes it more red, and if I click and drag down, that takes just a tiny bit of it away. So in this, just really subtly, I want to take just a tiny bit of the red away by clicking and dragging down. And let me just tell you, as for what direction does what, really just practicing with this will help you figure that out. Okay, let's call that good for curves. I'm going to close this panel by clicking the double little arrow up here to collapse it. And let's do dodge and burn. Now, dodge and burn would permanently affect this image, which I've just clicked on the layer in the layers panel. And I am focusing on editing non-destructively, so I want to always keep one of my originals here in the layers panel. So to make a copy of this that I can do whatever I want to, I can click and drag it down to the new layer icon and let go. And I'm going to call this one dodge and burn. Now in your tools, the dodge looks a little bit like the zoom tool, but it's below the teardrop. If you click on that and get the dodge tool, you should see a circle. If you don't see a circle and only see a little crosshairs, look down at your keyboard. I bet your caps lock key is on. So anytime your cap locks is on, it gives you a crosshairs for any tool that is using the brush settings. But if you hit caps lock, it will take that away and you can see the edge of your brush. Alrighty, so we haven't talked at all about brushes, and we'll really be getting into brushes in about 2 more weeks, so I am just going to show you the real basics right now. With one of these brush tools, to adjust the size of it, you can right click and change the size. So it'll show you right now it's 127 pixels, and that's actually a pretty good size for doing this sort of thing. I'm going to click this slider and make it down a little bit. The other thing that you can't really see from this circle is the hardness of the edge. So does it have a fuzzy or a crisp edge? If this slider is all the way up at the top, it has a hard edge. If it's all the way at the bottom, it has a fuzzy edge. And when we're working with dodge and burn, it's a good idea to keep it pretty fuzzy. Alright, so we're set up with our brush, and we could have selected any of these other ones. For example, this one looks like it's already pretty fuzzy. Maybe I'll select that, click that one, and then just adjust the size. And then when I move out here onto my canvas or click anywhere, that right-click window will disappear. So Dodge tool will probably be automatically set to midtones for the range. Now, what are midtones? We talked a little bit about highlights, midtones, and shadows, but I just want to reiterate. Highlights are the brightest areas on the picture. Shadows are the darkest area on the picture, and midtones is everything else that's kind of in between. And with our curves adjustment, we brightened up kind of all of those and made the blacks pop just a tiny little bit more. What the Dodge tool does, though, is instead of making the change to everything all at once, it will just make it selectively to the area that you're painting on. So let's say I wanted to brighten some of her hair in here. Not a whole ton, but just a little bit. I can click and drag and see that effect happening. If the effect is too strong, those first couple of times that I'm clicking, I can change the exposure by clicking and dragging this little exposure slider. And usually I actually like to work with these more in the 50% range, because if I keep doing this, she's going to just get way too bright. But it's fun to just even see what it is. Now I'm getting my Dodge tool back every time after I use my zoom tool by hitting the letter O. I'm going to make this size smaller so I can focus more on just her hair. Now the focus of this image is the girl's face. So I don't want to make really bright areas really far away from her face, because bright areas draw the eye. We want to keep bright areas up closer to her face. So I'm looking at this and thinking, you know what, I think that got too bright. So I'm going to go to my history panel and just step back, or you can use the Command Option Z key command to do the same thing. I'm just going to step back until that area darkens down a little bit, and then get my Dodge tool by hitting O and continuing on. So I'm just going to brighten this stuff up a little bit. And that's really the only area I think could be brightened, maybe in the hat just a tiny bit so it doesn't look so much like a solid blackness. So that's brightening with Dodge, and typically when you're using it you want to keep protect tones on, because that will make a difference. You're welcome to try it without to see what it does without. So burn is located underneath the Dodge tool. So if you click on Dodge and choose burn, you've got your tool selected, and it works the same way except it goes darker. And right now we're set to making the mid-tones darker. So I'm not trying to make the shadows darker or the highlights darker. What I'm really trying to make darker is kind of this odd shadowing that's down here that's also got some like JPEG artifacting, that kind of square pixelation look. And you can see this is getting darker. So this is another way that you can help draw the eye to your center of focus, is to lighten the area around your center of focus and darken the areas that are away from your center of focus. And for these big corners, it might be nicer to have a bigger brush. So I'm going to right click and resize my brush. Whoa, my bad, I actually have the wrong tool. Okay, I'm going back to my burn tool and resizing my brush. Thank goodness for undo, right? Definitely wish I had one of those in real life sometimes. So the goal with Dodge and Burn is never to get like solid, flat areas of either black or white. I don't want it to look like I've used Dodge everywhere. but you can create some contrast by darkening and lightening areas. So let's show you a before and after. So this is with Dodge and Burn, and this is before with Dodge and Burn and before. So it is a subtle thing, but each one of these adjustments is a subtle thing, but it adds up to something even bigger. So here's the original, and if I turn on my curves layer and then my Dodge and Burn layer, you can see how that works. So Dodge and Burn, very useful.